your undivided attention. I want you to get the kids out, grab a snack, sit down. Guilty until proven innocent. According to the Equal Justice Initiative, thousands of people have been wrongfully convicted across the United States, due in part to official indifference, to innocence, and error. It is well documented Black people are more likely than white people to be wrongfully convicted of serious crimes they did not commit. In recognition of Black History Month, welcome to episode 1 of a 4-part series detailing the stories of innocent Black people who were wrongfully convicted due to official indifference to their innocence. A joint project between the University of California, Irvine, University of Michigan Law School, and Michigan State University College of Law found Black people are more likely than white people to be wrongfully convicted. Once convicted, Black people are likely to spend more time in prison before being exonerated. According to a report by the National Registry of Exonerations, Black people represent 13.6% of the American population. However, they account for 53% of the over 3,000 exonerations in the registry as of August 2022. That same report found innocent Black suspects are 7.5 times more likely to be convicted of murder than innocent white suspects. It is well known Black people fall victim to police misconduct at a far greater rate than whites. Some cases of wrongful conviction of Black people are well known. A case that is now famous is that of the Central Park 5. In the case of the Central Park 5, 5 teenage Black and Latino youths were convicted and served sentences ranging from 6 to 12 years in prison for the assault and beating of Trisha Milley, a white female jogger. All later had their charges vacated after a prison inmate confessed to having committed the crime. From the outset, the case of the Central Park 5 gained national attention. A New York real estate developer spent $85,000 of his own money on an ad campaign advocating for the death penalty to be reinstated, seemingly calling for the Central Park 5 to be put to death well before they were even convicted. However, the overwhelming majority of the 3,200 exonerations across the United States did not see the same attention, publicity, and fame as the case of the Central Park 5. Over the next 4 weeks, we'll be peeling back the curtain, looking at 4 lesser-known cases of Black people who were wrongfully convicted and spent decades in prison before finally being exonerated. The case of Malcolm Alexander. I wasn't supposed to be there. Malcolm Alexander was a 21-year-old young man living in Louisiana. He spent 38 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Despite the miscarriage of justice and lack of evidence, Malcolm was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for aggravated. How could such a gross miscarriage of justice take place in a country that often describes its justice system as being one of the best in the world? How was Malcolm Alexander finally exonerated? November 8, 1979, the owner of a newly opened antique store in Greta, Louisiana, was in her store all alone when a young Black man entered into the store. Now, something about this individual made her feel uneasy. She became suspicious of him almost immediately. She wanted to kind of get him outside where, if something happened, people may hear, or he may not take the chance of doing anything knowing that someone could intervene. So she said to him, hey, let's go on the outside of the store. I got some really nice furnitures out there. Let's go take a look at them. I don't know if that's what she said, but I'm assuming that's what she said. Unfortunately, her intuition about this individual proved to be right. As she turned around and headed towards the front of the store, he walked up behind her, hit her over the head with a handgun, grabbed her, and dragged her into the back of the store where there was a small, dark, private bathroom. In there is where she for the first time by this individual. The telephone in the store was ringing, I guess, on and off during the first assault, and could suppose that that made the attacker a little bit uneasy himself and starting to feel nervous. This phone has been ringing for a little while and she hasn't answered the phone. Someone may decide to come and check on her because the store is open, so someone may decide to come and check on her to find out why she's not answering the phone. Whatever his reasoning was, he wanted her to answer the telephone to make it stop ringing. He dragged her to the front of the store, held her in a chokehold, and said to her, if you make any attempt to alert this caller of what is going on, I'm going to shoot you. Now, she had already experienced violence from this man. She took his threat seriously. She was able to end the phone call without the caller knowing that she was in need of help. She was dragged back into the bathroom where she was for a second time. When the attacker was done, he told the victim not to move. He made his getaway. I can only imagine what she felt like with this individual threatening her life and violating her in such a personal manner. With the individual gone, the victim attempted to clean herself up. There was a towel in the bathroom, so she used that to try to clean herself up, and then she called the police. Once on the crime scene, police was able to collect physical evidence of the assault. They took as evidence the towel the victim used to clean herself off, and on the bathroom floor, upon inspection, they were able to collect 3 pubic hairs. Considering the attack took place in a dark area, it's understandable the victim was unable to get a really good look at the attacker's face. She didn't see him long enough or well enough to be able to say he looks like this or he looks like that. She described him as being a young black male, early 20s, medium complexion. She said he was about 6 foot tall. He weighed somewhere between 165 and 170 pounds. She described him as wearing jeans, dark windbreaker, and a navy cap. Once on the scene, the police in Louisiana was very much eager to apprehend the black man that had a white woman. This eagerness led to 2 black males being seen as suspects early into the investigation. The description the victim gave of her attacker was broadcasted over the radio. Within about 10 minutes of the broadcast, police came across a young black man on a bicycle similar to one the victim had reported her attacker rode up to her store on. Police also said that this individual was riding his bicycle and his pants was not zipped up. With his pants not zipped up and him being on a bicycle similar to one the attacker was on, police saw him as a possible suspect. They took him to the store. He stood outside of the store. The victim remained on the inside of the store, but she was able to get a really good view of this individual. Quickly let the police know he's not the individual who attacked me. Hopefully they got him to up his pants. He was not detained. He was allowed to leave. After this, BN was taken to the hospital where a was performed. A few weeks after the attack, November 30th, BN saw a young black man that she felt could be her attacker. She reported this to the police. Police launched an immediate investigation into this individual. Through their investigations, they learned he was an employee of a local car dealership. During the course of the investigation, they spoke to his co-workers. His co-workers all reported that he was a hard-working individual and there was nothing in his character that was consistent with someone who would have perpetrated such a heinous crime. December 18th, the victim was shown a photographic lineup which included a photo of the employee from the car dealership. The victim was unable to identify anyone. It's now a couple of months since the attack. The police have had multiple leads. They weren't any closer than they were when they arrived on the scene November 8th. So the investigation had stalled. Now this is when Malcolm Alexander started to be viewed as a possible suspect. 4 months into the investigation, February 1980, was when Malcolm Alexander first came on the police's radar. Now Malcolm had been arrested for a white woman accused him. Malcolm said that there was an encounter with this woman However, Malcolm says the encounter was consensual. After the encounter with Malcolm, this woman demanded Malcolm give her money. Now, I don't know if this was a sex worker, Malcolm's girlfriend, his side girl. I don't know who she was to Malcolm. Told the police that he did give her money. Now, I'm guessing she went and made this report because Malcolm probably didn't give her as much money as she had asked for. He maybe only gave her what he had. He might have decided, it wasn't all of that. You know what I mean? I wasn't planning on giving you any money anyway, but since you demanded I give you some money here, leave me alone. Whatever the case was, Malcolm was not charged. That leads me to believe that the police was either able to corroborate Malcolm's assertion that this was consensual, or there was just simply not any evidence to move forward. Malcolm was not charged. Now, even though Malcolm was not charged in this case, the lead detective investigating the assault on BN, he saw Malcolm. He said he kind of fit the description of the attacker, the attacker from back in November. He fits that description. It's important to know the differences between the description that the victim provided of her attacker and Malcolm. And she did say her attacker was a young black male in his early 20s. Malcolm was a young black male. He was 20 years old at the time. But Malcolm was 5'9", and her attacker, according to her, was about 6 foot tall. She described her attacker as being of medium complexion. In my opinion, Malcolm is not of medium complexion. But the lead detective, as I said, they were getting frustrated. They had tips, leads, and it was leading them nowhere. So I guess he might have been thinking, let's just give it a try. March 24, BN was shown another photographic lineup. This time, the photographic lineup included Malcolm. BN, she was familiar with Malcolm. I don't know if maybe Malcolm came into the store at one point, or if she ran into him at the grocery store, or if she just saw him in the neighborhood. She identified Malcolm as being the attacker. Police listed her identification of Malcolm as the attacker as tentative, meaning she was uncertain if Malcolm was her attacker, or they weren't satisfied with her identification. Something about it caused them to say it's tentative. A few days later, March 27, the victim was asked to view another lineup. This one will be an in-person lineup. The ones where you can see the suspects, the possible suspects, you can see them, but they can't see you. So she was asked to come in and do a lineup like that. This lineup was problematic from the beginning. And this lineup, really, the issues from this lineup is one of the linchpins to how Malcolm Alexander ended up spending almost 38 years in jail for something he didn't do. Malcolm was the only person from the previous lineup, from the photographic lineup. He was the only person in this in-person lineup. And for some reason, Malcolm's face seemed familiar to her because she did tentatively identify him as the attacker just 3 days earlier. She could have been remembering Malcolm from when she saw him in the photographic lineup a few days prior. Also, the reason why I feel like it's problematic, another reason, now she's asked to come in for another lineup. Now, she didn't see anyone else from the previous lineup. That could have been suggestive to her that the authorities knew Malcolm was in fact the attacker. Maybe they have evidence that he's the attacker. And now they just need to go ahead for a second time. Just go ahead and say it was him. And we got it from here. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that is one of the things that could have happened. I don't know if the photographic lineup you saw of Malcolm, if the photo of Malcolm was a mug shot. Now we know a month or so earlier Malcolm was arrested in February. Granted, he was never charged, but if he was arrested, a mug shot might have been taken. I could find no evidence anywhere of Malcolm having had any encounter with law enforcement prior to February of 1980. If in the photographic lineup, Malcolm was the only person whose photo was a mugshot, that could explain why she picked Malcolm out. I don't know. The only photo I can find of Malcolm for this period is a mugshot. I don't know if this was taken after he was arrested in March or if this was taken in February when he was first arrested over the unsubstantiated allegation made by the white female. Ian once more identified Malcolm from the live lineup as being her attacker. This would have been the second time she identified Malcolm. The identification was again listed as tentative. Again, the police did not have confidence in her identification of Malcolm. The lead detective in the case was not present for this lineup. When he came to the station 3 hours later, Bien was still there. They had a private conversation behind closed doors. To this day, no one knows what they spoke about. I don't think it's a coincidence that after this private closed door conversation, she went from tentative to almost positive that Malcolm Alexander was the man that assaulted her that horrible day in her store. The police had several leads. They had been searching for this man. They had possible suspects, and those leads led them nowhere. When they decided Malcolm fit the attacker's description, and the victim now saying she's almost positive that it's Malcolm, she didn't say she's 100% sure that it's Malcolm. Was there any way, any means for the police to add some more accuracy, credibility, making the case against Malcolm stronger? Was there any way for them to do that? Well, there was. They collected evidence from the crime scene. If the police wanted to ensure that they were handing the person prosecuting this case, if they wanted to make sure it was handing him an ironclad case, they would have tested the evidence. Testing the evidence would have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Malcolm Alexander was in fact the young black man that violated this woman in the worst possible way. But if Malcolm Alexander was not the young black man that committed this crime, testing the evidence would have also proven that. Is the lead investigator and his team, are they interested in solving this case and getting justice for this victim? Or are they more interested in closing this case by any means necessary? You guys let me know. With BN being almost positive Malcolm Alexander was the young man that assaulted her in her store on that horrible day in November, Malcolm Alexander was arrested and charged with. The date of Malcolm's trial was almost a year to the date of BN's. On November 5th, 1980, Malcolm went on trial. Bernie, why are you saying trial in air quotes? The court transcripts for this trial was 87 pages long. I have read several charging documents. That were 200 pages long. Lest I forget, the entire trial took place over one day. Jury selection, the prosecutor presenting his case, Malcolm's defense, the jury being sent off, deliberate, come back, announce the verdict. I ran out of fingers to count all of the things that happened in one day. One day. Was the prosecutor interested in getting justice for this victim? Or was he, like the police, just trying to close the case? Malcolm was able to retain an attorney to aid in his defense. Unfortunately for Malcolm, the attorney he retained was an attorney by the name of Tosh Joseph. And Tosh Joseph, in my opinion, is quite possibly one of the worst attorneys ever. Court documents show Joseph missed court appearances. Joseph was like, I don't know, how important is that one? I really gotta be there? I don't think I gotta be there. I didn't sit that one out. Didn't come. Didn't file a single motion in his client's defense. He should have filed a motion to challenge the victim's identification of Malcolm as being her attacker. The identification process was flawed. It was not just flawed, it was tainted. It was skewed. It was broken. Twice, the victim identified Malcolm tentatively, according to law enforcement. It was law enforcement that listed it down as tentative. There was something about the way that she identified Malcolm that caused them to pause. Her certainty was only boosted after a private conversation with the lead detective, who had seen all of the possible suspects fall by the wayside. He had spent months searching for the black man that dared a white woman in Louisiana. He was getting nowhere. What did he tell BN behind closed doors that made her go from tentative to almost positive? If Mr. Joseph had filed a motion challenging that identification process, perhaps he would know what they spoke about. But Tosh Joseph went to law school. I went to accounting school. Tosh Joseph, and I did do a couple law classes. Yeah, the side note, my dad wanted me to be an attorney. So I was supposed to be an attorney, but I never wanted to be an attorney. I wanted to be an accountant, and then I became an accountant. Let's get back to the story because I digress. That was an easy motion for Malcolm's attorney to file. The police didn't test the physical evidence. The only evidence they had against his client, Malcolm, was this flawed, tainted, skewed, improper, and whatever adjective you can find. The disidentification should not be the only thing that y'all can go to court on. If that's what y'all have on my client, I got news for y'all. Because I know that's flawed. I know she thought it was someone else. So if that's all y'all have, yeah, just try me over in a day. Because I'm going to get that identification thrown out. Then there was the matter of the physical evidence recovered from the crime scene. Both the towel and the ring contained semen from the attacker. I already said the police didn't get it. The police did not get it tested. The prosecutor didn't care that it wasn't tested. One would think he would have wanted it tested, right? The prosecutor, because he want to make sure he get this slam dunk case. Malcolm's attorney could have asked for the evidence to be tested. What was Tosh Joseph doing on those days when he wasn't showing up for court dates? Because he could try to redeem himself by telling me, hold on, I was out here trying to get the evidence tested. Tosh Joseph, listen, the man didn't have time for Malcolm. At the trial, when the victim testified, she was no longer almost positive. She testified under oath that there was not a doubt in her mind that Malcolm Alexander was, in fact, her attacker. Tosh Joseph didn't challenge it. Okay, you may say she's a victim of sexual assault. You know, you don't want to be seen as being rude or badgering her. Tosh Joseph's job was to do just that. The state's job is to represent the victim. The defense attorney's job is to represent his client. Asking her about the inconsistencies in her identification is not rude. It's not badger. It's doing his job, whatever it takes, to defend his client. Mr. Joseph did not even have an opening statement. He did manage to come up with a closing arguments. His closing arguments took up all of 4 pages of the court transcript. Raise your hand if you think Joseph was working on his closing argument during the trial. Now, I don't know, I couldn't find the entire court transcript, so I don't know if the lead detective testified. One would expect that he testified, right? He's the lead detective. He made this case. I would love to know about that closed door conversation. And also, any conversation that the prosecutor or the lead detective had with BN in the months to the lead up of the trial. Because the last we heard from her on March 27th, she was almost positive that Malcolm was the attacker. Now fast forward to November 5th, she is now testifying beyond a shadow of a doubt. Malcolm Alexander is the person that attacked her. It's not uncommon for prosecutors to meet with victims, especially when their entire case hinges on the victim's identification. What were those conversations like? Were there more closed-door conversations with the lead detective? With Joseph as his attorney and star witness, the victim, testifying, there was not a shadow of a doubt Malcolm Alexander was in fact the individual that attacked her in her own store nearly a year ago. Malcolm was doomed. Malcolm was doomed. Joseph did not even attempt to see if he could come up with a viable alibi where Malcolm was during the time of this attack. Malcolm at the time was working with a contractor. When the police investigated the employee at the car dealership, that investigation included speaking to his co-workers. His co-workers was able to tell them there's nothing in his character that would lead us to believe he would have done this. Joseph did not call one witness in Malcolm's defense. For goodness sake, you trying to tell me you couldn't find one person to testify about this man's character? You couldn't find one person, Joseph. I think I know why the police didn't do that. When the police did it the first time, I think they were trying to, they were conducting a genuine investigation. They learned the lessons how not to let someone get away. Proper investigation. So we're not going to investigate this time. We know this. Malcolm, you black. Your accuser, she white. Something sketchy going on here. So we can't arrest you for that because y'all talking about money and how much money you got, and we can't arrest you for that. But I'll tell you this. We have a real victim, a white woman who's a real victim. And according to her, it was a young black man in his early 20s. You're a young black man, you're in your early 20s, you could do. I have no proof of that. That is my conjecture. That's my theory. Why else would they not, the police I'm talking about now, why else would the police not give Malcolm the same benefit of the doubt as they did with the employee from the car dealership? Ask yourself that question. Why wouldn't they? If in fact they wanted to apprehend the person that perpetrated this violent, gross crime. Just before 5:30, the jury was excused and sent to begin the deliberation process. In less than an hour, they had already went over the evidence. Let's give them a pass. There was no evidence. They had discussed it, voted on it, fill out the paperwork, come back to court, deliver their verdict, and excuse by the judge, all in under 60 minutes. In fact, they were so efficient that it took them exactly 56 minutes to do all of that. It's a wonder they said Malcolm was guilty. Is it possible that they already felt that way before they even went inside there? That less than an hour was spent filling out the paperwork? I don't know. At the end of the one-day show trial, Malcolm Alexander, having been found guilty of aggravated, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No evidence that he committed this crime, but he was sent to prison without the possibility of parole. In Louisiana, it depends on the victim's age. At the time of the attack, she was 39 years old. It's possible they considered her to be a middle-aged woman. That's the reason why he got life without parole. Because if it's a middle-aged woman or a young child, then there's no coming back out of prison. Not for you, no, so you staying in jail. And if you commit, rightfully so. When Malcolm went to prison, he had a 2-year-old son, Malcolm Jr. His siblings were alive. His mother and father were both alive. Malcolm was taken away from them and went on a plantation called Angola. If you guys have not yet done so, this is a good time for you to stop and give the video a big thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure that you are, so that you don't miss any episodes of this 4-part series, Guilty Until Proven Innocent. Make sure your notification bell is turned on. That way you are notified every time new videos go up. So let's get back to the case of Malcolm Alexander. Angola is considered one of the most brutal, notorious prisons in the United States. It is also known as the Alcatraz of the South, or the farm. This prison is so brutal. Criminals, legitimate criminals, real criminals, they would be stressed the heck out when they found out they were going to Angola. In the 1930s, hardened criminals would break down upon hearing they're going to Angola. At one point, 10% of prisoners in Angola were stabbed. This place was not somewhere you wanted to go, especially a young, innocent man who has no prior history of contact with law enforcement. Malcolm lived a normal life up until February 1980. Angola's roots goes back to 1880, 100 years before Malcolm would be sent there. Angola was created by a former Confederate major, Samuel Lawrence James. He created the plantation with the intentions of storing prisoners there. He named the plantation Angola because Angola was the country from which most of the slaves originated. Malcolm was not being taken thousands of miles away from his family. Angola would be a 3-hour car ride away from Malcolm's home. As a result of a total breakdown in the criminal justice system, Malcolm was condemned to spend the rest of his life working at Angola. Malcolm describes Angola as what we would see from old pictures of slavery. Malcolm said it was like you see in old pictures of slavery. Those are Malcolm's exact words. Malcolm said that they even had a quota they had to meet. When describing his first day at Angola, Malcolm describes himself along with rows and rows of prisoners, most of whom like him were black, marching down to cotton fields, separated by armed men on horsebacks. Malcolm looked at this and said, "This is slavery." Malcolm and his fellow inmates were expected to be ready by 7 a.m. They would board the back of a truck and they would be driven down to the farm where they would spend the rest of the day working, always under the careful supervision of the free men. That is how the prisoners at Angola described the prison guards there. Malcolm found himself harvesting crops on the same land his enslaved ancestors did 150 years prior. During the 3 years Malcolm worked in the farm, his job differed depending on the season. Malcolm picked cotton, okra, corn, cauliflower, potatoes, whatever was in season. Today, 75% of the incarcerated at Angola, like Malcolm, are black, with the majority of the free men being white. During the cotton season, the slaves, prisoners, were required to fill a 36 by 80 sack that sometimes weighed as much as 70 pounds. If the cotton was dewy or the sack was not sufficiently filled, the prisoners would face consequences. This could include losing out on leisure time, having their access to the law library taken, and in extreme cases, solitary confinement for missing an arbitrary quota set by. It's a wonder Malcolm, throughout his time at Angola, the thing that came to his mind was slavery. It didn't matter what the weather was. At Angola, prisoners worked. If it was raining, they worked. If the sun was shining, they worked. If it was cold, they worked. If it was hot, they worked. If there was frost, they worked. The only exception was for those injured or sick. If you are at Angola and you're not sick and you're not injured, you worked. I want to read Malcolm's exact words. I done seen where a horse fell out from the heat. I done seen where a prison guard got off of the horse to stand in the shade of it. I done seen where fellow prisoners fell out from heat exhaustion. Malcolm goes on to describe what life was like in Angola during the winter. Malcolm said it would be so cold, you'd have to put on so many socks, and you'd look for work that would keep you warm. Like Malcolm, Angola to me sounds like state-sanctioned slavery. Angola grows approximately 4 million pounds of crops annually, some of which is sold on the open market. Some of which is sold on the open market. Angola make profit, significant profit, off of the fruits of the labors, back-breaking labors of young black men like Malcolm Alexander. The rest of the crop was used to feed the incarcerated and the livestock that was at Angola. The Angola that Malcolm Alexander spent almost 38 years in sounds to be very similar to the Angola that was created by former Confederate Major Samuel Lawrence James. For the 3 years that Malcolm Alexander worked the farm at Angola, Malcolm personally harvested and moved thousands of pounds of cotton and crop. And the most Malcolm will be paid for this back-breaking work, 4 cents an hour. 4 cents an hour. To work in the freezing cold, to work in the scorching heat, to work no matter what the season was, harvested and moved thousands of pounds of cotton and crop, some of which was sold on the open market, and the most he would ever be paid, 4 cents an hour. I tried to calculate Malcolm's salary. The calculator thought I was putting in something that I couldn't understand. See, I don't understand it either. I don't understand how a prison, a part of the best criminal justice system in the world, state-sanctioned slavery, is a part of it. I said what I said. State-sanctioned slavery. As a youth, Malcolm, like many, got summer job. Malcolm had some experience working the farm, but he was paid. He would pick okra during the summer, and other times he would cut the neighbor's grass, for which he was paid 25 times more than the 4 cents an hour he was paid to harvest and move thousands of pounds of cotton and crop that would be sold on the open market. State-sanctioned slavery. Malcolm, knowing he was an innocent man, never gave up that one day he would be exonerated. After reading about DNA testing, Malcolm reached out to the Innocence Project for help. Founded in 1992, the Innocence Project is a non-profit organization that works to free the innocent, prevent wrongful convictions, and create a fair, compassionate, and equitable justice system that works for everyone. In 1996, Malcolm asked the Innocence Project to look into his case. Unfortunately, the Innocence Project was unable to help Malcolm, not for lack of trying. The Innocence Project was told in 1984, just 4 years after Malcolm had been convicted, the evidence from his case was inadvertently destroyed during a mass destruction of evidence from closed cases. Another breakdown in the American justice system. The American justice system has one of the most lengthy appeals process. Malcolm had only been incarcerated for 4 years when the evidence from his case was, quote, inadvertently destroyed. During the appeals process, the state relies on the evidence that they use to secure the initial conviction. 4 years after he was incarcerated, the evidence was inadvertently destroyed. Was this a case of the justice system saying Malcolm was never going to get out of prison? You can go ahead and destroy the evidence in the case just 4 years after he had been convicted. That's what it sounds like to me. You guys tell me, what do you think? Without any evidence to test, the Innocence Project was forced to close the case. I could only imagine what that felt like to Malcolm. This was a man who at this point had been in prison for 16 years for a crime he did not commit. He's found an organization, someone that is willing to at the very least look into his case, only to be told they could not help him because there was nothing for them to test. Remember, Malcolm reached out to them after reading an article about DNA testing. If DNA testing was done on this evidence, Malcolm knew he would be set free. No evidence, nothing to test, nothing to see here. Now, the authorities did say the destruction of the evidence in the case of Malcolm Alexander was due to human error. I can't prove that's not the case, but considering what we have learned thus far about the treatment of Malcolm Alexander by the American justice system, I would be lying if I said I was side-eyeing inadvertently human error. If the state of Louisiana thought Malcolm Alexander would give up, they had another thing coming. In 2004, the state of Louisiana enacted a post-conviction DNA testing law. Malcolm filed a motion to have the evidence in his case tested. I'm sure you're probably thinking, didn't they already tell Malcolm in 1996 due to human error all the way back in 1984? All of the evidence in this case had been destroyed. Well, that's what they said. But Malcolm was thinking, by filing this motion, this just might cause a more thorough search. And during this more thorough search, Malcolm was hoping, praying, some evidence was preserved and that it would be located and tested. And this nightmare, this is now in 2004, finally be over. Malcolm wasn't done filing motions. Mr. Tosh Joseph may not have filed any motion. Thankfully, in 1999, after numerous complaints about his defense skills, he was disbarred and his license to practice law in the state of Louisiana, and I could only hope and pray in any other state, was revoked. Malcolm filed a federal petition for a writ of habeas corpus. A writ of habeas corpus, which quite literally means produce the body, is a court order demanding a public official, such as a warden, deliver an imprisoned individual to court and show valid reason for that person's detention. The procedure provides a means for inmates or someone acting on their behalf to challenge the legal basis of their confinement. The process includes a court hearing during which the inmate and the government can present evidence about whether there's lawful basis for jailing that individual. Court has the power to issue and enforce subpoenas in order to obtain evidence. It took some time. But Malcolm's gamble paid off. 9 years after Malcolm filed a motion to have the evidence tested, in 2013, Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory discovered the hairs. Remember the hairs? The hairs that was collected on the bathroom floor where the crime was committed? By some miracle, they weren't destroyed in 1984, as the Innocence Project was told they were not destroyed. In 2015, the Innocence Project got the prosecutor to agree for DNA testing on the hairs that was found on the bathroom floor all those years ago in 1979, in the very spot where the attack took place. 2016, the DNA test was performed. The test came back and it said it was from one individual. More importantly for Malcolm, Malcolm was excluded as being the individual that the hairs originated from. This DNA testing was done in 2016. If you fast on calculating, drop it in the comment sections how long Malcolm had been in prison for at this point. 36 years. The evidence that proved that Malcolm Alexander was not the despicable person that perpetrated that crime was collected within hours of it having been left there. The police had it. The prosecutor knew it existed. No one got it tested. If it was tested, Malcolm would have not spent a day at Angola. Malcolm would not know anything about Angola to describe it as slavery. He would have never been sent to that plantation if the evidence collected on the day of the crime was tested. The Innocence Project, along with the Innocence Project in New Orleans, filed a petition to have Malcolm Alexander's conviction vacated. The petition argued the most reasonable conclusion is that the hairs originated from the man who repeatedly raped BN from behind on the floor in the very location where the hairs were collected. So all Tosh Joseph had to do to defend his client. He didn't need the opening statement to defend his client. He had none. He only needed to make one court appearance, arguing the motion, asking the judge to have the state, to have the parish test the evidence that had been collected a year prior to November 1980. The petition also cited Tosh Joseph's failure to provide adequate legal defense for Malcolm. January 30th, 2018, the day Malcolm Alexander and his family had been praying for almost 38 years, finally came. Malcolm's conviction was vacated. The judge dismissed all charges and ordered Malcolm Alexander be released from custody immediately. Malcolm's and his family's almost 38-year-long nightmare was over. Malcolm became a free man. When Malcolm walked out of prison, awaiting him was his mother, his sister, and his son Malcolm Jr., and his grandson Malcolm III. Unfortunately, Malcolm's father would not live to see his son walk out of prison a free man. Malcolm's siblings weren't able to visit him as much as they would have liked, as their mother, aging and health began to fail her. But I'm sure she said, I want to be here for this day. I want to be here for this moment. I want my son to see me. I want to see my son's face. I want to be able to touch my son. For the first time in almost 38 years, I want to be able to touch my son, hug my son, kiss my son.
I'm going now.
With your son?
Malcolm Jr. was 2 years old when Malcolm went to prison. He was 40 years old when his dad walked out of prison. He grew up without a dad.
This Sunday, they'll spend their first Father's Day together in almost 4 decades.
When you were a kid, what was Father's Day like?
I didn't have a father, so it was just a blank day. In my mind, I'm just thinking that he just was going to die in jail.
He was now 58.
To actually hug him as a free man was like a dream come true. Words can't even explain how I felt for us and all the emotions I was feeling.
It's a hard life to live without them, because you're living without love. See, there's no love in the institution.
And you go to your friend's house and they have their dad, and it's like, wow, man, I wish I had that.
What's it like just to be able to sit side by side?
No rush.
No rush.
Nowhere to go. We here.
Yeah.
We done made it where we wanted to go.
You don't seem bitter at all.
Very happy, you know what I mean? It's like I said, it's a new beginning.
This family has one word in their Father's Day card: gratitude.
All part of it is being separated from your family.
For no reason other than official indifference to Malcolm's innocence. Malcolm had a teenage grandson by the time he came out of prison. All of those years, all of the moments stolen away would never be returned. Christmas dinners, Thanksgiving, birthdays, wedding anniversaries. Malcolm wasn't married. He was only 20 years old. He wasn't married at the time. He's married now.
She was there for me for a few years until I made the decision to let her go. And I wanted her to go off and live her life. But since my return to society, we have gotten married. For the holidays, I'll be spending it with my lovely family and my gorgeous wife. And I'm more looking forward to spending life as long as I possibly can with my wife. And to me, that would be making up the years that I have lost in the institution.
Malcolm made friends with a dog. I supposed to leave that out of the story recounting the ordeal Malcolm endured. It took away from what really was taken from Malcolm and what life at Angola really was like. But I could find very little information. In fact, I think there was no newspaper article that talked about Malcolm losing his freedom not just to society, not just his freedom to walk the streets, but Malcolm became a slave at Angola. The Angola Malcolm Alexander walked out of as a plantation masquerading as a prison. Malcolm himself describes Angola as slavery. I know when you commit a crime, you have to pay for your crimes. But does that mean you become a slave? I mean, when you think about life at Angola, right now, 75% of the incarcerated at Angola, like Malcolm, are black, with the majority of the guards being white. I'm sure they traded their horse for something else as they oversee Master's plantation. Doesn't sound good, right? Master's plantation. But if that's what it is, that's what it is. Tell Master do better. Tell the state of Louisiana to close Angola down. Tell the state of Louisiana to change conditions at Angola. District Attorney Paul Conrick Jr. agreed with Malcolm's post-conviction attorneys. Defense attorney during the day-long trial 37 years ago provided ineffective representation in violation of Malcolm's constitutional rights. To be clear, Tosh Joseph should have never, ever been given a license to practice law. Now, if we want to talk about violating Malcolm's constitutional rights, there's no doubt his constitutional rights was violated. His right to freedom was taken. So yes, his constitutional rights was violated. If we are going to name check Tosh Joseph, let's name check everyone else who violated his constitutional rights. Let's start with the lead detective and that private conversation he had with the victim. He had the evidence that exonerated Malcolm. He and his team collected from the crime scene hours after the crime occurred. His failure to test it resulted in Malcolm Alexander's constitutional rights to freedom being taken away. The district attorney that prosecuted that case, knowing good and goddamn well that there was physical evidence, instead based his entire case. I don't know why I'm saying entire, it was only one day. Based the whole case. The future of a young man, a young father, hanging in the balance, is taken away, ripped away, and sent to the plantation to work for Master.
What was truly taken away from me is the chance to be what I have decided out of life, regardless to whether it would have been, how you would say, a lawyer, or to even just riding on the back of a garbage truck.
Let's talk about everybody who violated Malcolm's constitutional rights starting in February of 1980. I got the lead detective, the prosecutor, the judge, the state of Louisiana for giving Tosh Joseph a license. The man didn't wake up November 1980 and was all of a sudden was a horrible attorney. He wasn't showing up for court dates. The Innocence Project lists the reason for Malcolm's wrongful incarceration as ineffective trial attorney and a flawed eyewitness process. And we discussed this early on in the video. This eyewitness process was broken, skewed, whatever adjectives you could find. This case boils down, in my mind, to official indifference to innocence. I'm getting ready to end this video. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section. I want you to be kind not just to each other. If your opinion differs, we can have a dialogue, a substantive dialogue, without being mean-spirited. We don't have to agree with each other, but we don't have to be disagreeable. I don't delete comments from my channel, but if the comments are mean-spirited towards each other, I will delete your comment. If your comment is mean-spirited towards the victim, I will delete the comment. The purpose of this series is not to be mean. The purpose of this series is so we can have substantive dialogue here on this channel. I want to highlight things that are happening, and there's a void in this space. Guys, we have reached the end of today's video. I am eager to get this conversation started. In the comment section, let's get this conversation started. Thank you guys so much for spending part of your day with me on this, the first episode of Guilty Until Proven Innocent. I would like for you to please give this video a big thumbs up. That does help me here on YouTube. If you are not yet subscribed, you have to hit the subscribe button. That's the only way you'll be able to turn the notification bell, ensuring you don't miss episode 2 of Guilty Until Proven Innocent. Until next time, guys, please be safe. Bye. If you remember from Malcolm's life in Angola, when he worked the farm, all of them who worked the farm, if the cotton was dewy, the bag wasn't filled, they didn't meet the quota, it's part of their punishment. Their access to the law library will be taken away from them. Why am I highlighting this? When Malcolm went to prison, Malcolm was not a lawyer. Malcolm probably knew as much about the legal system as most of us. Nothing. That's why he hired Tosh Joseph. After all, the state of Louisiana gave him a license. Malcolm learned about habeas corpus. Malcolm no doubt learned about that in the prison library. I can only hope and pray that if nothing else, restricting these inmates' access to the law library is not something that is currently happening at Angola. I hope and pray Angola is still not a state-sanctioned slavery facility masquerading as a prison. Especially this initial installment that we're doing in recognition of Black History Month. I want this installment, I want your undivided attention. Are you aware that in America, in your country, are you aware there are over 3,200 cases of exoneration? Are you aware of that? I wasn't. I knew that it happens in every country. And it's a tragedy every time it happens, wherever it happens. But it is a total breakdown. One that people don't talk about in the American justice system. It's a total breakdown. These cases are total breakdowns. All of the cases we're going to discuss in this first installment, they all show a total breakdown in what is described as the best justice system in the world. In the best justice system in the world, this is what's happening. My goodness, what is happening everywhere else? You know what I mean? If people could just be plucked off the streets and lose their freedom for 4 decades, evidence getting destroyed, evidence being dispersed here, there, and everywhere, court orders being ignored,